Coordinator with AASHE. It is my pleasure to welcome you all. As many of you know, AASHE's mission is to inspire and catalyze higher education to lead the global sustainability transformation. We provide an expansive collection of online resources, networking tools, and educational events such as today's webinar and an annual conference and expo which will be held October 15 to 18 next year in San Antonio, Texas. Our call for proposals just opened this week. For more information, please visit conference.aashe.org. AASHE members represent around 20% of the colleges and universities in the US, as well as institutions in 20 countries, including China and South Africa. You can learn more about AASHE on our website, www.aashe.org. Please note this webinar is being recorded. If you experience technical difficulties or have to leave early, you and others can view the recording later. Presentation materials and additional resources will be available after the live broadcast as well. Everyone in the audience is on mute, so the only way to communicate with the panelists is by typing your questions or comments in the questions pane in the control panel on your screen. Feel free to type in questions or comments at any point during the webinar, and these will be addressed after the presentations. If you have additional questions, please email them to webinars@aashe.org, and we will get back to you. At the end of the webinar, you'll have the option to provide feedback regarding today's presentation. We take your suggestions into account when planning for future webinars, so please fill out this post-webinar survey, and thank you in advance for letting us know your thoughts. It is my pleasure to welcome all attendees, and thank you for joining us today. At this time, I'm going to turn to Meghan Zahniser, AASHE's Executive Director, to get us started. Hi, Meghan.
Hi, Daita, and hi, everybody. Hopefully you can see me here. Welcome today, and thanks so much for joining. The intent behind this webinar is to try and provide a little bit of optimism before closing out 2016 and getting ready for 2017. We were envisioning all of you sustainability staffers, faculty, students, perhaps gathered around a coffee table with yummy treats and fun holiday sweaters. I think I'll get the prize today for the presenter that looks most elf-like. So hoping you're all doing well, and again, grateful for you all being here. I know that I'm not alone in feeling a lot of big questions and concerns in the aftermath of the election, and it raised a lot of questions for me and others at AASHE. What can we do? What should we be doing? And clearly continuing to meet the needs of our members is priority number one. But one of the things that came up, actually even just in the past couple of months, is that one of AASHE's core strengths, something that we continue to hear from our member, is not necessarily providing all of the answers, but providing an opportunity for our community to gather together. So our strength as a convener felt really important right now. So the intent was to try and gather our community, again, to sort of check in. Our annual conference is such an opportunity for people to get inspired and feel motivated. And so soon after this year's conference, a lot of folks in our community felt pretty down, pretty uncertain about the future, and probably, again, a lot of questions around what's in store. So this webinar is not necessarily going to be chock-filled with solutions, but the idea is at least to try and get us thinking around ideas for the future, how we can continue to do the good work that needs to happen within higher education, and hopefully actually expand our messaging so that we can be heard by more. At this time when the country is so divided, we want to use sustainability as an opportunity to bring people together. AASHE, as well as sustainability as a whole, is a nonpartisan issue. We need to get everybody involved. So by hearing from our panelists today, the idea is at least trying to tap into some optimism, hope, and tools as well for what we can do on each of your individual campuses and collectively as a movement to help advance our mission. So with that in mind, we're going to start out today. We have three wonderful panelists, and I'm so grateful to them for being here. Tony Cortese is our first speaker, from not only founder of Second Nature, now at the Intentional Endowments Network, but really one of the fathers of our movement. AASHE would not be here without Tony, and I'm so grateful to him for his long-standing support of our organization and for being here today. So at this point, I want to hand it over to Tony. Take it away, Tony.
Thanks, Meghan. Thanks, Meghan. I want to echo what Meghan had to say. First of all, it's a delight to be here. And secondly, I want to say that one of the most important things that Meghan said is that, that the community that AASHE has is all about supporting each other to actually make these changes. When I look out at the challenges, it's very simple. For the first time in history, the human species has become the primary determinant of the habitability of the planet for ourselves and all of the species. And the current economic, social, and environmental trends are not sustainable. They're exacerbated by the projected growth in population, resource consumption, and consumer demand, coupled with declining resilience in social and ecological systems. The challenges related to climate change, water, food, economic inequality, poverty, and social unrest pose an existential threat to society. And there is no other institution in society that is designed for the long term and to actually come up with the solutions to help society thrive. Higher education's mission is very simple. It's the renewal and the expansion of civilization. And if we don't do our job, then it isn't going to happen. That being said, one of our challenges is, and the thing that makes it hard for us to do our work every day, is that basically we're trying to disrupt the current paradigm that basically says that humans are separate from nature, that if you just let the market forces rip, that if we just use technology, all of society's social, health, economic, environmental, political, and security issues will be solved. Well, they haven't. And so the sustainability effort is really about transforming the way we think about an economy. Can we create an economy that will actually be beneficial not just to the investors and to a minority of actors, but it will be beneficial to all the rest of humanity, communities, and nature. And that's essentially what we're about. Now, we're facing some, huge challenges right now, not only with the climate crisis, but because all of a sudden we see an administration in Washington that is not friendly to this idea. And so, you could easily put your head in the sand and say, oh my God, we're doomed. Well, the fact is that it's really not the case. Just let me give you a couple of examples.
And Tony, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. This is Meghan. I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure that you knew. Unfortunately, we're not seeing your slides. You might have to just click a button so that we can make sure to see you as well as your slides.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm just about to use the slides.
Perfect.
But I'm having trouble doing that. And I don't know why. Okay. Somehow I've lost the connection. Can you actually advance them for me?
Daita, who's basically leading the call here, hopefully can step in and help you out, Tony, so that hopefully we can see you on your webcam as well as your slides.
Okay, let me just see if this works. Can you see me now?
We now see your computer.
Okay, so let me just go to the slides.
Sure,
because
that's
these
great.
are the points that I wanted to make. Okay, and I will be very brief. In the last 2 years, there has been more new installed electrical generating capacity in the United States and China that is either solar or wind, as opposed to coal and natural gas. Very few people would believe that, but it's really true. About 68% of China's new installed generating capacity is renewable energy, and in the United States, it's almost 60%. Why? Well, the first slide shows the cost reductions in solar and other energy sources, in the last 8 years. A 60% drop from 2008 to 2015 for utility scale solar. And now, it's now the case that utility scale solar and wind are competitive not only with coal, but with natural gas in many places around the world and in this country. And here's another way of looking at where we are. The U.S. SIP, which is the U.S. Sustainable, Responsible, and Impact Investing Foundation, has been for over 20 years, has been looking at the trends for sustainable, responsible, and impact investing. And as you can see from this slide, in 1995, it was about $600 trillion. I'm sorry, $600 billion. And in 2012, it was almost $4 trillion. And today, it is over $8.7 trillion. And that is 22% of all the institutionally invested funds in the United States are now going through some sort of screening for sustainable, responsible, and impact investing. I can guarantee you that the people that are doing this investing are not doing it just for the environmental and social purposes alone. They would not be making this level of investment if it also wasn't financially beneficial. So now we're finding that if you invest utilizing environmental, social, and governance criteria, that you will actually get a better rate of return, or at least as good, if not better rate of return, than if you were not applying those criteria at all. When we turn to higher education, the fossil fuel divestment movement has doubled over the last 15 months to now almost $5 trillion in assets have divested of fossil fuels worldwide. And that is an enormous amount of money, and as you can see, it's a huge jump over last year. And these, in 2016, the divestment movement wasn't just in the United States, it's international. It spans 76 countries, and 55% of the divesting institutions are based outside the United States. So the bottom line is that the train has left the station. And I recently returned from a conference for people that have been doing this kind of investing for the last 25 or 30 years. There were 750 people there, and they represented about $20 trillion in assets. And what they came to the conclusion about was very simple. They said, look, if the government isn't going to do it, the private sector is going to do it through our investments, and the work at the state and local levels are really where it's going to happen. And of course, higher education has to lead. And we established the Intentional Endowments Network simply because, despite the fact that we have over 650 colleges and universities that have committed to becoming carbon neutral, there was like a lead wall between the investments and everything else that the schools were doing. And so we set up a network to help them actually align their investments with their environmental, social, and governance goals, because we think it's actually going to get them better returns on investment. And we wanted higher education to be a leader in everything it does related to sustainability: education, operations, and investments. Thank you.
Tony, thanks so much. That was awesome to hear about the work that you're doing with IEN and your other thoughts post-election. As a reminder to the attendees, as Daita said at the beginning, everybody's on mute because we have such a great number of folks here, but we do encourage you to submit questions via the questions pane. We have two other speakers, but the goal is really to have enough time at the end to really dig into some questions, comments, ideas that you folks have. So at this point, I'd like to turn to our next speaker, Marcia Chatelain, Associate Professor at Georgetown University. Many of you will fondly remember that Marcia was our closing keynote speaker at this year's AASHE conference. And in the post-conference survey, what we learned was that Marcia's keynote was among the favorite points of this year's conference. So I'm so grateful to Marcia for being here today to share some of her thoughts on her thinking and sort of reasons for being optimistic post-election. Marcia.
Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to have an opportunity to talk to you about what I see as a pivotal and key moment in terms of not only the nation and the world, but also the work we do on our campuses. I know for me, I feel like the election has fundamentally changed the identity of my institution as being based in Washington, D.C., and a place where young people come to pursue careers in public service. And so there are a lot of questions not only about how we are connected to the leadership changes in Washington, but also what are the messages that young people are getting about leadership and how we respond to these moments that we've described as reflecting deep levels of resentment and division in our country. And so, you know, one of the things that's really important for me in terms of thinking about colleges and universities as a space that is reflective of the deep thinking that we have to do about the world's challenges is asking ourselves, what is our plan? How do we sustain our progress and prepare for challenges? And so I just have some kind of overreaching large ideas that I think not only can be helpful for people who do sustainability work, but I think these are questions we should be asking every unit head, every division, every leader at our institutions. So I think that the first step in all of this is to poll our communities. One of the dangers in a moment where there is discomfort about some of the discourse and some of the tensions that exist after a very difficult shift in political power is that we can make some really broad assumptions about where our community is at. And so I think that it will be really key in the next few months on campus for us to poll our community to get a sense of what the concerns are. I think that for many of us, we have seen a shift on college campuses around issues of undocumented students. We've seen a growing embrace of not only our lesbian, gay, and bisexual students, but our transgendered students. We've seen a shift in the way that we talk about race and justice, the way we think about policing on campus. All of these issues are tied up into this election, and so I think it's very key for every unit to have a plan on how they are going to poll the communities that they serve and the communities that they seek to serve about their specific concerns. We know that every student and every staff member and every faculty member and every administrator sees our institutions as providing a certain set of or meeting a certain set of needs. And so the question is, if we feel like these needs can't be met on campus, where do we find those needs? Where can those needs be met? And so by polling our community and making sure we have very clear stories about where the concerns are, we can do better planning. The next thing I think that is really important is to listen to the fears as well as the hope. I think that there has been an overwhelming sense that there needs to be some type of moving on process on campuses as well as the nation. There has to be healing. But one of the things I hope we don't do is minimize the very real fears, concerns, and anxieties of the people we serve. And so I think what is key for right now is for us to be able to imagine a framework where our capacity to listen to and engage people's fears does not get in the way of imagining hope. And I think that this is very delicate work, but I think through the listening we're able to do that. And so one of the things that I did for my class right after the election, because a lot of my students were very upset and concerned about the outcomes, is that I had them have a conversation with each other that started with the things that I fear the most and the things that I'm glad about. And what a lot of students said about what made them glad was that they had a community in which to talk to, they had people who became visible allies on very specific issues, and that while the hopefulness may not come necessarily from an external arena, the hope came from the ability for the community to come together. And so I think that we are going to be in a moment where we have to really tolerate the fact that both of these feelings are happening at the same time. Assess the shifting landscape and language for your work. And I think that this is a moment in which people who are interested in questions of not only environmental and justice and sustainability, but racial justice and economic justice and political justice may find that the landscape has changed, and so the entry points and the language must also change. So much of the rhetoric around the election was about a segment of the American population feeling left behind or isolated from the process of where power happens. And I think that in the same ways, we see that at our institutions, at our colleges and universities, we have some of those same dynamics. We have people who may feel at the margins of whether it's the academic enterprise or the working conditions on campus, or people in the communities in which our campuses are located who feel very much alienated from what we do. And so the question is, if we see this moment as a call to unify people and to bring them into the processes that are important to us, this perhaps is a time to change the language and the entry points for that work. And so if we can't compel better behavior and better practices on our campus simply because it's good for the environment, the question is, what do we have to explain about the resources that we need for the future, the resources that we consume now, and why that needs to happen? And so I think that this is also part of the process, is really learning how we use different language to appeal to people who may see themselves at the margins of our communities. And the final thing I'll say is that we have to narrate this moment for future generations. I think that we are in an unusual time in which we're seeing this great political change, and we have the capacity to capture who we are at this moment. For people who are concerned about the rise of extremism in the 1920s and 30s and 40s, they may not have had the capacity like we do to record their thoughts and to decide what side of history they were going to be on. At this moment, we have so many technological tools and social tools available to us to narrate what this moment is. For many of my students, this is their first presidential election in which they voted. This is the first time that they are understanding politics in the many ways that it is deep. And so for them, they want to know if this climate is normal, how things always are, or what's very different about it. And so for us who are leading young people in this moment, we have to narrate what is happening now, and we have to make sure that future generations have the capacity to learn what we are learning right now. And so in many ways, I think I find myself in a position where I have a lot of questions and I have a lot of concerns, but being on a college campus and being in community and in solidarity, I love that solidarity is one of the themes for your conference. To be in solidarity with young people who are struggling with a political moment heightens my ability to realize that I have resources to provide them a context in which this work is doing. And if your campus is not doing this kind of work or not even engaging in a conversation about this process, I really implore you to ask them to do it, because this is probably our greatest tool in figuring out this moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcia. So great to hear, especially your experiences with your students post-election, and thank you all for so many of those thoughts. I'm sure many of the attendees, like me, found themselves nodding a lot throughout your presentation, so thank you. Our next speaker, many of you well know, Leith Sharp has been a member of the campus sustainability community for a long time now, and I'm so grateful to her for joining us today. I think from a conference room somewhere or another. Leith, would love for you to share your thinking in terms of post-election, but also ways to continue having a sense of hope and optimism, as well as motivation for the rest of our community. Leith.
Thanks, Megan, and thanks, Marcia and Tony. and Daita for getting us going here. Hi, everybody. A few thoughts that I wanted to share with you and build on Marcia and Tony there a little. As we grapple with this changing landscape, we still are confronted with a key question of dramatically improving our current rate of change and innovation at all scales and across all sectors. And what we know at this point in time is this election result hasn't changed our essential challenge, but as Marcia said, it's changed the meaning that we make of it and perhaps the entry points that we have to redefine for ourselves as we grapple with this. What I'm showing you here, I've just been surveying lots of different groups as I do workshops with them about what rate of change increase do they think needs to happen in their organizations and societally. And what I'm finding is 40 to 90% of people that I'm surveying believe that we have to triple or quadruple our current rate of change and innovation if we are to make meaningful progress in time on all of our shared global social, economic, and environmental imperatives. Now, what I'm thinking about post-election are things like, this is a quote from the National Security Advisor appointee, Michael Flynn, one of his first meetings with the existing staff, where he basically tells them right up front, the first thing that you all need to know is that he's always right, and that his staff will know they're right when their views meld with his. Now, this is the kind of leadership ideology now that's coming with the package of the Trump administration, and we are likely to see this enormous contraction into the authority structures, the command control structures that permeate federal government and the various agencies that they now have control over. So we're entering an era at that federal level where there's a contraction into command control and a very strident type of use of authority and mandate is likely to follow. Why this is important for us to really think about the implications of this and to prepare ourselves for what this means in terms of strategy, and also just preparing ourselves psychologically, emotionally, spiritually for the new landscape ahead. Now, in our work, what we have discovered is there's at a certain point, if you overuse mandate and authority, you stimulate increasing social friction. And that social friction will build up in the system and foster a type of disengagement, and it can lead to exacerbated points of tension and conflict that can take to the streets if pushed far enough. So I think this is likely to be sort of the landscape that we've entered into now, is about this negotiation with the needs for people to be more wholly included, for us to be orienting around two operating systems, which is really what we find in our work as change agents, as sustainability professionals. Command control alone simply cannot drive the type of engagement, creativity, shared purpose that's absolutely essential for grappling with 21st century scale problems. So I think we've got to grapple with this fundamental leadership ideology that's coming in now, and think about what we've learned in our own practice that can perhaps inform ourselves tactically. One of the things I'm struck by is that our ability on the ground to unleash greater and greater levels of synergy between this more adaptive operating system that's really about people coming because they feel a sense of intrinsic purpose, connecting and collaborating because there's good social health and trust, and the kind of creative group intelligence that comes from that, and how that can really support and enable command control to steer the ship in the right direction and to really mobilize resources and to create structures and systems that serve our best shared interests. We know this in our space. We've learnt this the hard way, that you really do need to reconcile both operating systems and to have them working powerfully and synergistically together. What we only are just realizing now is the extent to which people that traditionally are occupying the command control space in our organizations, this is one survey of a group of upper middle management, a large team of upper middle management staff. I explicitly asked them, what operating system do you work in, and what operating system would you prefer to work in? And this was an incredibly telling result. And I'm offering this because I think it should inform our tactics going forward. 75% of these middle managers are in more command control than they personally want to be. So there's a huge latent appetite in our organizations for people who are hungry to be in a more purpose, adaptive driven state and relationship with others. And I'm going to posit that this is the case across society, across organizations, across sectors, which means that this administration will be out of step in a deep sort of ideological way as it contracts into more command control. That will be out of step with this sort of latent appetite that's been growing over, particularly over the last couple of decades, where we have inside our organizations at every scale an increasing appetite for a more adaptive, dynamic, more purpose-driven work. So what we have to be careful about in these times is that these two operating systems don't necessarily play well together. They are optimized when the relationship between them is focused on and made healthy. And at the moment, when we survey our organizations, we find that the relationship between our adaptive capacities and our command control capacities very unbalanced, very frustrating for people, and basically fundamentally unhealthy. Now, this could be scaled now to a societal level where we do risk, and perhaps it'll be a necessary risk, a destabilization at a larger scale societally if we can't do the work to quickly build the bridges that we need to build. And those bridges, I think, really relate to all of us activating to animate what is purposeful, what is intrinsically of value to us, what it is that we love to do, and what kind of struggle it is that we feel most called to be in. This defines our sense of purpose and meaning, and then to activate through AASHE's networks and at communities where we are, as Marcia said, to really build those connections, create that connective tissue to activate that adaptive dynamic so that we can become a rebalancing force as we get this contraction into this command control ideology. I think overall, we see historically that humans respond when our command control structures, these authority structures that we've put a lot of trust into, when they start to let us down, we have the ability to swarm as a large adaptive operating system and really pulse together, connect those horizontal relationships, and really be absolutely unrelenting at every scale to drive purpose ahead of this structure of command control. Just a quick anecdote, the EPA, Trump has said, well, he said a lot of things, but he said he's up for cutting the EPA. Now, we have a student in our change leadership course that's in the EPA. He has responded by creating a group called Resilient EPA, and they've actually set up a massive adaptive operating system. They're formalizing it, of EPA staff that are doing all sorts of legal research and really preparing themselves to function as an adaptive operating system to protect the EPA no matter what comes. And I'm seeing this over and over again, that at every scale, from Standing Rock to those more sort of bureaucratic defense mechanisms, there's an urge now, and a necessary urge, to connect to each other, to find ways to have powerful horizontal swarming around what is purposeful and meaningful to us. And I think this is absolutely necessary. We're going to have to scale this up effectively to counter this contraction into command control. What it looks like for all of us on Monday is we want to basically increase the number of ideas that hold our purpose true. So if the Sustainable Development Goals or other sort of articulations of purpose work for you, the work now is to identify those individual ideas that help to bring that purpose to life, and using those ideas and really allowing yourself to fall in love with those ideas so that you have the emotional resilience to work through them come what may, and then connecting with others that share the love of these ideas. This is what it's going to take. We are going to have to really bring purpose to life. But the beautiful thing about this is, in the work of bringing purpose to life and the work of activating that powerful adaptive operating system, it's very nourishing to us, and it has in its own way an ability to energize us and to keep us in a state of emotional resilience with each other. So building those skills to convene, curate, connect, and bring people into shared purpose. And I'll reiterate a bit of what Marcia said. It could not be more essential to do this with younger generations in mind, and to find incredibly meaningful entry points for their sense-making of this era. But I think our work takes us further also to activating very meaningful architecture for them to be engaged in bringing ideas to life, in bringing purpose to life, and convening and curating in their own networks, so that we can effectively swarm around whatever's facing us in the years to come. That's all I wanted to say.
Hey, thank you so much. So appreciate you sharing your thoughts and framework that I know resonates with many. In fact, we've gotten a few comments of folks just sort of validating what you were saying in terms of command control and adaptive operating system. So really appreciate you sharing. And I'm going to ask at this point, first the attendees, just a reminder if you could submit questions in the questions pane. And now to this panelist, if everyone could try and bring up your camera, we're going to try and do a little bit of a Q&A here with some videos. And I have one question that I'd like to pose to all of the panelists, and maybe Leith, we can start with you. So Marcia actually mentioned, basically referenced the AASHE conference for next year. We've just recently, the past week, distributed our call for proposals for the AASHE 2017 conference in San Antonio. And our theme is Stronger in Solidarity. So we were very intentional with that theme, and I thought perhaps, again, before we send our community off for the holidays, that we can have a very brief here, a little brainstorm for them as to what does that really mean for you? When each of you panelists are thinking about Stronger in Solidarity within the context of sustainability in higher education, what comes up for you? And secondly, imagining you're in San Antonio's Convention Center next October for the AASHE conference, what are the stories that you want to hear about in terms of that theme? What are the ideas, the campaigns, the projects? Any thoughts that you have to share would be helpful. Leith, let's start with you.
Yeah, so for me, Stronger in Solidarity, there are two dimensions that come up for me. One is our capacity for group intelligence, and for us to become increasingly sophisticated at bringing people together, diverse voices, so that we can get the benefit, that unique group intelligence output that's only possible when you have beautifully curated, diverse voices and diverse thinking, but that's facilitated effectively for the synthesis. So I think as AASHE progresses and we bring sessions to next year, if we can think about more and more powerful ways for us to activate our own group intelligence. The second is the sensing that's possible when you really connect powerfully and you find that solidarity, not only in perhaps solidarity in terms of what you agree you're going to do, but I think even more interesting is solidarity in agreeing to sense and perceive together, to make sense together. And that sense-making process, I think, can be done in very large numbers of people. And again, if we can think of really clever ways for having lots of voices contributing into what we sense and the meaning that we're making of our work together. Those two things I think are really exciting, and I'd like to see sessions that help us understand how we curate and convene ourselves with increasing power.
Wonderful. Thanks, Leith. Marcia, your thoughts on Stronger in Solidarity?
Yeah, I mean, I think that two things that I've sensed since the election. One is I hear from a number of students who say, well, now is the time for me to, really stand up and fight. And one of the things I say in response is, well, from my perspective, you've been fighting all along. And I think that there is a balance in these moments between feeling reinvigorated to engage and struggle, but we do that sometimes at the peril of not recognizing the struggles that we've already been through in the past. And so finding that balance between innovative thinking and not reinventing the wheel is always a challenge. And so I would love for people to be able to share how they were using past strategies for change and innovating them and helping them work in a new context, because I think it's very dangerous for any movement or for any group of committed people to feel like they have to destroy a previous edifice and rebuild a new one. And I think that the urgency of this moment is making us feel like we have to do that. But I think what we have to do first is reflect on the many wins and gains and how they were done in order to really preserve that. And the second thing I would say about solidarity, I think that this is the moment, if anything is going to really change or shift, for folks who are engaged in framing the solidarity, or rather the sustainability question around resources and the environment, to take those frameworks to the various places on campus that also need to know about how to harness human resources and how to harness the various emotions that people are going through and how to sustain the desire for change that we've been seeing emerging with Black Lives Matter and other movements. And so I think that this is really the time where there can be some really dynamic teaching across movements, and I would love to hear the various ways that people have been able to do that and feel like they've gotten stronger as a result.
Thanks so much, Marcia. Tony, your thoughts? And you're on mute, Tony.
I don't know how to unmute myself.
I can hear you now.
Okay.
We got you.
Two thoughts that build on what Marcia and Leith were saying. First, the historical perspective, and thank you for bringing that up, Marcia. I lived through a similar time when Reagan became president. And they wanted to destroy the EPA. I was running the state environmental department in Massachusetts at the time, and we all thought it was going to be the end of the world. But we found a way to come together and to preserve what we did and actually expand what we did. And the way we did it was to build coalitions with people that we had never engaged before. So I think what you're saying is really important to make sure that we have a narrative that helps people and to show them how we did it before. Okay. The second thought I have, Meghan and everyone else, I am so frustrated over the idea that sustainability is about the environment. It's really about the sustainability of human civilization. And in order to think about this differently, I think we have to start with the social, economic, and environmental justice, because if you don't have justice, you can't have sustainability. And if you don't find a way to live in harmony with the life support system, you can't achieve social justice, economic justice, or environmental justice. So it's really about, as Leith was saying, how do we get people to see different kinds of operating systems so that we're thinking in a systemic way that actually helps people at the local level deal with these issues and build these coalitions. You know, I never got the movement in environmental protection in Massachusetts, or even at a national level, until we could show the health consequences of what was happening, because that was what was important to people. But it's not just the health. We have to approach this as a human challenge.
Thank you, Tony, and know that there's some comments being submitted, and validation of the points that each of you raised. Next question, just being mindful of time here because we're running a little bit low. We do have an international audience with us today, which is fantastic. And one question from one of our international attendees: how can we get to the agenda of policy and decision makers to listen, agree, and hence act more sustainably? What should be done first? We in Saudi Arabia have many Trumps in our universities. How can we deal with them? Marcia, let's start with you. Your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that every movement needs to know what is at stake for every person. And sometimes I think when we are doing really good work and we're doing work that's situated around justice, we often lose sight of self-interest. And that's one of the complicated things about trying to do work across ideological lines or trying to galvanize a lot of support. Sometimes we don't speak the language. And so one of the things that I've often encouraged students to do is learn the terms at which people in university administration define success and explain to them how what you're doing will make them successful. And so if the terms of debate are, you know, an institution that is a peer institution or an aspirational institution, if they are taking sustainability seriously, then you remind them, you know, our competitor does this in this way, and this is important. And so I think it's about being very clear as to what motivates and what are the spaces in which various actors are getting their accolades, and finding a way to use that language. And sometimes you won't be able to. Sometimes it's too outside of your kind of moral framework. But I do think that this is a challenging time in which to say, what does the institution value, and how are you going to present your movement as moving them closer to those goals?
Thanks, Marcia. Tony, your thoughts?
If I were one of the
sustainability people at a college or university right now, I think one of the first things I do is gather all the people that are worried and begin a conversation about what are you worried about and how can we help each other. And then I would begin to think about ways that, as Marcia was saying, you know, if you want someone to change, what you need to do is understand where they stand and the issues that they're facing, and trying to find out, learning about what their challenges are, and how you can bring some solutions to their challenges without using the word sustainability, by the way, and demonstrate to them that this is going to create a win-win-win in so many different places. That's, I think, going to be really important. A second thing I would say that builds on that is you need to find champions that are not you. You find champions that have the respect of the people whose minds you're trying to engage, and you go and you talk to them, and you talk to them about, you know, geez, you know, here's an opportunity. I'm trying to help so and so figure out how to deal with it. How do you think we should approach it? Or maybe is it something that you can approach them with, as opposed to me? So I think we need to think about, you know, Marcia said it right on, and Leith did too. It's a lot about listening and really engaging people where they are, and finding out, as Leith said, how to see what their greater purpose is. And to the extent that you can help people see that we're all in this together, and that if we work together, we can create synergy that will allow all of our needs to be met, I think are is really important. It will also help identify those places where you're going to be running up against the Mack truck, And we need to be able to do that, because we're not going to be able to get everybody to come together singing Kumbaya. It's not going to happen. But we have to make it in their interest to see that there is that larger group of people that Leith was describing very nicely pictorially, that it is going to react in some negative ways, but can also react in positive ways if we figure out a way to deal with these issues.
Thanks, Tony. Leith, your thoughts?
Look, I can't top either of those. They're brilliant. The only thing I'm going to say to our international brothers and sisters is that we need you more than ever. And what you learn going through the hard work in contexts like Saudi Arabia and other international contexts, you're going to learn something that you can contribute back to the rest of us, and vice versa. And I'm really excited for AASHE to become more international, because I think post-election has brought home to me how that is even more important for us in every way. So yeah, let's just keep a hold of each other.
That's great. And again, panelists know that there's a lot of, not necessarily questions, but comments of gratitude, comments that this content is really resonating. So know that. And here's a similar question, but sort of building on it, and I really appreciate the way it's phrased, which is, how can we build solidarity and explain its necessity without alienating people in the majority? Leith, why don't we start with you?
You know, a lot of the work we do has to be experienced into, rather than, you can't talk someone into being collaborative. Like, if they don't get it to start with, the best way is to give them a really healthy social experience where they come into a group and they feel that they're able to contribute and that their voice matters. And those, offering people those kinds of experiences, it can actually be like a refuge for many people that are otherwise feeling alone, excluded, and devalued in their community or in their organizations. So I actually think that if you can build your skills as a curator and a convener, where you can hold spaces that people come together in, and you have the experience that they have of the dynamics with each other, if they're healthy, social, vibrant experiences that you're able to facilitate, they will be affected by that. And not only will they come back for more, but at some point they'll want to start being part of curating and convening that. So I think you can start small, and it will actually self-grow, because it is contagious. Like, social health is a contagious phenomena. And if we can master the art of igniting that on any scale, and purpose is like the honey to the bee here. It's like you attract people in around ideas that they have a love for, and you use the idea as an invitation into a socially healthy experience together. And that's the secret sauce to then a type of contagion that can very much be a balm and a refuge for a context that's contracting in fear and overuse of mandate.
Thanks, Leith. Marcia, your thoughts?
Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, you're on mute.
I'm on mute. Sorry about that. So many thoughts about alienation. Well, I think the first step of any type of communication across any kind of difference is to recognize what needs people are trying to get met. And then I think you move from there, because what I've found in working in racial justice is that a lot of the anxiety about engaging difficult dialogue or any kind of change is that people start to be afraid that their interests will not be taken seriously. And so I think we have to shift sometimes our activist work away from, I'm just going to present people a reasonable idea, or I'm just going to give them a lot of facts and surely they will understand, to what am I offering someone that provides them with the security and the validation that we're all looking for. And so sometimes that comes in the form of knowing you did the right thing. Sometimes that comes in the form of saying, you will you will have more resources available to you because you will have a larger community. Sometimes it's just a matter of you will be able to relate and understand the world better because we're providing you a bigger frame or a bigger context, and it might reduce some of the anxieties or the conflicts that you have currently. You know, at the end of the day, we really need to be focusing on when we listen to resistance to our ideas, someone is telling you they are afraid of something, and not in this kind of simplistic way where people say, well, this election was about fear because people are afraid of losing their jobs and these types of things. This is really not what is at the heart of it. At the heart of it is that people want to know that they have a place to end up if they stand up for what is right. Justice work can be very alienating, and so the question is, how do we make sure our communities are a loving and good space for people that if they have to stand up in justice and walk away from a set of ideas or even a set of people, that they're walking towards something that is valuable and sustaining.
Thank you, Marcia. In the spirit, Tony, and do you have anything burning you want to add right now, Tony?
No.
No. Okay, I have a quick question.
Actually,
oh yeah, please.
I just want to add something. I think that, you know, right now the anxiety on college campuses is extremely high, as Marcia was saying, and the tension is all around social justice issues. So we're facing it at my own school at Green Mountain College, where we have a mission that is all about the triple bottom line of sustainability, and even at that, we're finding that the students don't perceive it that way. So we're now beginning, we're now trying to begin a dialogue with the students around what are their fears and what are the challenges that they're facing. And if they're fearing their safety, or if they're fearing, you know, hate crimes and things of that nature, they're afraid of those kinds of things, then we're not doing our job, because we have to create a safe space for the students to be able to explore all these different perspectives. And it's not an easy thing to do. And I think it is really important to pay attention to where people are right now. And I can tell you, as you know, as the chair of the board, we're struggling with good ways to do it. It's not an easy thing to do, but we're determined to do it because we think it's critical for what our mission and goals are.
Well, Tony, you actually addressed my last question, which was going to be about students. And I want to be very mindful of each of your time to our panelists as well as our attendees. We're right at the top of the hour. But before we go, just a couple of reminders. And also, first, just a lot of gratitude to our panelists today for sharing your wisdom with us. To the participants on the line, thank you for spending the past hour with us. And we look forward to connecting into your wisdom as well. We will be sending out not only the audio, the video of this, but we're also going to be sending out a list of resources, and know that those that submitted resources and additional questions, we will post the resources and we will follow up with you on your questions. Daita, I want to ask you, is there anything else we should remind the folks before we end?
Just that recording and presentation materials, will make them available through the AASHE Campus Sustainability Hub, and they will receive an email once they are available. So, that if they have any other colleagues that would like to watch the webinar, to encourage them to do so. And thank you to everyone who attended.
Absolutely. Thanks, Daita, for organizing. Thanks to Tony, to Marcia, to Leith, to all of you, and to the attendees. One of the themes that came up today hopefully really resonates and is a reminder to all of you that you are a part of a large, not just national, but international community of sustainability change makers. AASHE will continue to do the best that we can to represent our community and to continue to advance sustainability in higher education. And with that, we wish you a very, very happy holidays, and here's to a really successful and productive 2017. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.